Ready, Julie? All right, good morning. We're ready to start the Land Use and Transportation Committee meeting for Tuesday, October 4th. All members are here other than Friedrich, and he made me aware earlier this week that he would be in the field. First item is approval of the September 6th regular meeting minutes. I would entertain a motion. Member Bell, second member Klein. Any discussion or questions? All right, all those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is the recommended payment of bills and appropriation transfer request forms. I got a letter from the auditor that said everything was good. Those were emailed to you. Has anyone have any questions about either of those for the land use or the highway department? Let's see, did someone make a motion for that? Okay, member Wachinski, second member Thompson. All right, ready to vote? All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, appearances by members of the public and county employees. I believe we have one.
Yes, we have Anna Ziegler from the Farm Bureau, and she's on her way up. If you want to sit in this corner spot, that would be perfect, Anna.
Make sure I'm close enough. Is that okay? Can you hear me? All right, good morning. As she said, my name is Anna Ziegler. I'm with McLean County Farm Bureau. Farm Bureau is a nonprofit voluntary member organization, and I'm here on behalf of farmers and farmland owners, some of whom are participants in the Twin Groves project, and you have a decommissioning and escrow agreement on your agenda, so I'm here to just make a couple of comments about that. First of all, the purpose of the agreement, wind farm operators, the company, is responsible for the decommissioning of these projects at the end of their useful life. So what you have in front of you is hopefully a hypothetical that will never have to be used, because if the company meets their obligation, nobody has to touch these funds. But in the case that they don't meet their obligations, that's what this financial assurance is designed to do, is provide funds to the county and landowners to take the turbines down if the need arises. So just a couple of points, and some of these are addressed in an amendment that you got handed this morning, but I'm still gonna just mention a couple things. In the escrow agreement, it references High Trail Wind Farm LLC. We believe there's a second LLC name that should be added, Old Trail Wind Farm LLC. Our understanding is the company has the wind farm was built in 2 phases, and it's operating under 2 LLC names. There are 2 LLCs that pay the taxes on these turbines. And so we just want to make sure that all of the turbines involved in the Twin Groves project are included in this agreement. And we think it would be prudent to list the total number of turbines covered, because that would give you your total amount that needs to be put in escrow. It says $25,000 per turbine, but you need to know how many turbines to get your total amount. And then on the triggering event, what causes the clock to start ticking? So there's a reference to 18 months. They have 18 months to take down the turbines, and it references expiration, cessation, or termination of the lease. I'm not an attorney, but we're not sure that those words are broad enough. We think there might need to be some additional language, and that's what that amendment addresses. With a definition of the end of the useful life. So that's kind of what we're getting at there. And then just a question that might become an issue if these funds have to be used. The company is responsible for restoring the land to its original condition. But who gets to decide that it has been restored to its original condition? Is that the county says, yep, it looks good, the landowner says, yep, it looks good, or the company says, yep, it looks good. There could be a disagreement there. And so that could lead to conflict. And then this part may not be within the scope of this agreement, but just an item for your consideration. What is the process for landowners if and when the time comes? What is the claims process? Who's their contact person at the county? How are they notified that these funds are available and how to access them? And we also had some questions about if it was a reimbursement style process. Does the landowner have to pay for it up front and then request the funding? And again, the amendment addresses some of that, adds some more clarity there. So that's kind of the main things I wanted to highlight. I'm happy to answer any questions if I'm given the opportunity, or if you want to talk to me after the meeting, that's fine too. So thank you.
Yeah, I think technically, we're gonna wait till we get to this part of the agenda, and then if Hannah is still here, I may ask her to come forward with your approval. All right, thank you. I said Hannah, I'm sorry, Anna. All right, next item is 5A, Departmental Matters. First one is 5A1A, request approval, engineering service agreement with Cummings Engineering Corporation for 2150 East Road, Old Town Road District, Section 22-26135-00SP, and I would entertain a motion. Member Klein, second Member Thompson. All right, Jerry, you want to lead us on this?
Sure. So this is an engineering agreement to upgrade the approaches to the railroad crossing on 2150 East Road. And so a couple years ago, there was a petition going around from some of the residents out there, as well as some people that go to the school there off Ireland Grove. And so there's a lot of drivers that use these township roads. And there have been a couple accidents there over the last couple of years. And so so the railroad agreed to come in and put automatic crossing gates up at these two locations. And there's a location at 2250, which is the approaches don't need to be upgraded. They're just going to come in and put the crossings in, and nothing has to be done. And I'll show you some pictures here. But the crossing here at 2150 is really steep, and so they have to be a certain percentage of a slope coming off the railroad tracks. And but this one's got a lot of issues with drainage and the roadway itself. So I'll show you some pictures, and then we can go from there. So this is on the south side of the tracks, looking to the north. And so you can see this ditch over here. You can see how steep it is. And so here's a picture looking on the north side of the tracks, looking back to the south. The north side's not quite as bad, but it does need some, we'll have to do some adjusting to the grades here as we approach it, and then also build some shoulders so they can get the crossing gates, arms, and everything in there. So you can kind of see this. There's some sheet piling here that was used to kind of protect the bank. And I think with all the rains we had last June, it washed away, or started to wash away. And so once we start raising this road up through here, then it's going to make this ditch steeper. So we either got to move the ditch out in the field, or we need to look at like putting a storm drainage system through here. That's kind of what we're thinking. So, and then, so this is kind of another look from the side. You can kind of see where it's starting to erode and everything. So we need to do something here. And this is the culvert pipe that's going underneath the railroad tracks. So there's gonna be a lot of coordination with the railroad. They don't really like us, digging up their tracks, of course. We're gonna have to try to figure out something we can do to try to, get that thing shifted over if we need to, or if we might have to put a manhole in here and get in here and dig this concrete wall out. So, and then there's also a crossroad culvert right here that's also going to be replaced as part of this project. So we're kind of basically revamping the road and redoing the drainage in here to improve it all. And so the cost of the township, the total cost of the project, including the construction engineering, we have estimated around $225,000. And so the township agreed to pay 10% of that is all they have to pay, and then the grade crossing protection funds are going to take care of everything else with the approach work.
Questions? Member Bell?
Yes, how far back does your data go on accidents at this crossway, at the railroad tracks? And how many people have been killed that caused the people to petition that something be done?
I'm not aware of any fatalities. I think we look back for the last 5 years, and there have been, like, I want to say 3 accidents at this location. So I think one of them was a teenage driver, and then the other one I think was a few years ago, and I don't remember the circumstances behind that. So there wasn't any fatalities by any means.
Any other questions? Is the railroad, would you call it railroad crossing preservation fund or something, what'd you call it?
Yeah, it's a grade crossing protection fund.
So is that a federal thing?
No, it's actually through the state motor fuel tax.
Okay,
So the motor fuel tax, they set aside so many funds to go into the grade crossing protection fund. I think it's like 10 million a year or something. So
so it'll be 10% Old Town Township and then that fund will pay the rest?
yes,
So it won't become nothing out of any of our accounts?
no, nothing out of the county. We're just, since I didn't mention that, the township is using a motor fuel tax and RVI funds, so it needs to come through us because we'll basically administer the project and then pay out the funds
Okay,
we'll probably, I think, end up paying the consultant first and then have to get reimbursed by the grade crossing protection funds.
okay,
And that might be actually even after the construction's done.
okay. Member Thompson?
The crossroad, where exactly are we talking? 2100 and,
It is a half mile south of 1200 east. So Ireland, it's just half mile south of Ireland Grove Road.
the culvert under the railroad, you mentioned the railroad, they tend to be very difficult to deal with, and that culvert didn't look looked like it had issues, we'll just say that.
Yeah, I think the culvert might be okay going underneath the tracks, but that head wall and stuff that's kind of holding everything in is not. Yeah, it's not in good shape, and so it's got on both sides. So we're gonna have to see what they'll let us do. You know, I don't know if they'll let us slide something in there to extend it out further, or like I said, we might put a manhole in there and kind of tie everything together that way. So
I mean, like a big culvert or concrete.
yeah, and then there's a lot of drainage. You know, on the north side, there's a lot of water comes there, and then I think even parallel with the railroad tracks, there's a lot of water that comes to that area, as you can see by where the sheet pile got washed away.
So if you have to move that ditch over, we're talking about dealing with right-of-way issues then?
Right. Yep.
And so if we got to buy right-of-way again, is that this preservation fund going to help pay for that?
I think we did include it in the budget, so we might look at trying to enclose everything as far as the drainage goes first, and then if we need additional right of way, then we'll have to proceed in that direction.
Okay,
Or actually, I think maybe the townships would buy the right of way and not use these funds. He'd have to buy that probably on his own.
okay.
So
Well, for you that aren't aware, this is in Old Town Township, and I know there's a lot of people that avoid Tawanda Barnes in the morning if they can go into school. So this is a road probably that's used more frequently with young drivers in the morning and in the afternoon. So, you know, the question is whether it's worth doing or not. I guess if you can prevent one accident, it's probably worth it.
yeah, I think so, and especially I think a lot of it, this culvert, the crossroad culvert there underneath Township Road, he's been wanting to do something with that for a while. So he's actually kind of getting the best bang for the buck with
Right.
using these funds to help with that project as well.
Okay. Member Thompson?
Yeah, so based on the picture there with the erosion of the ditch along the railroad, do they have concerns about this at all, or they're just kind of?
That we've talked to him. I think I think the road commissioner even met the railroad out there and wasn't really getting much help. You know, I think, it's because this is on. I think a lot of this, I think that sheep island was put in and it's on railroad property.
Yeah.
And so, you
I
know,
mean,
they need
that's
to be
the-
responsible for fixing it or at least providing railroad flaggers to protect the workers need to go in there, and they weren't wanting to do any of that. So,
I've seen that before in other locations where their banks are eroding to the point of, I mean, it's like,
sure.
and they're like oblivious. It's
With
crazy.
the Illinois Commerce Commission being involved, I guess they do have maybe some pull with the railroad, and so they can, you know, get things done or talk to the railroad and try to move things along. So, yeah. So,
Any other questions? All right, ready to vote? All those in favor say aye. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Since young people use that road a lot, you said morning, generally going to school, young drivers. What is the time frame of, from start to finish on this project?
well, it's a good question. So there's quite a bit of approvals that have to be done with IDOT and the Commerce Commission and the railroad. So that's probably going to delay things. So we're guessing it's probably going to take a year to get it designed. But as far as the actual construction, I'd say probably like a month would all take to get it completed. Yeah. So hopefully we'll try to get it done during the summer, and hopefully, you know, next year if everything goes well. But there's some environmental work that has to be done so that could take 6 months to a year right there, just doing the design work and getting that get the approvals from that and everything. So.
But then again, other than the, what I would call school traffic, that road's not used a whole lot. Again, it's not like Island Grove Road or Holder Road or whatever.
Right.
There's a road a mile each direction, I think, from there that people can use.
Yeah, I didn't bring that. Well, I can't. I think it's like under 400 cars a day for the traffic count, so it's not a lot. You know, probably this time of year with harvest traffic and everything, it's picked up. But hopefully, what we'll do, you know, we're going to improve the site distance and just kind of improve the whole area.
All right. Any other questions? All right, ready to vote? All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is 5A1B, request approval of an intergovernmental agreement with the city of Chenoa. I would entertain a motion. Member Klein, second member Bell. All right, Jerry?
So this is an intergovernmental agreement with Chenoa that we've been working in Chenoa quite a bit the last couple of years, and so in 2020 we did a half-mile project where we went in and reconstructed the entire street through there, and then after that was completed, the city of Chenoa took that road over, and then we also had some additional wind farm work on the south side of Chenoa that we completed. And so now we're looking at a section to construct a road, or not reconstruct, but resurface the road from Route 24 to Route 66. And so as part of that, we were going to give that road to Chenoa as well, because coming out of town, the traffic count's really low as you go south out of town. So the city of Chenoa is going to basically take all this over, and as things went along, they decided they have a water main on Division Street where our road's at that they need to get replaced. And so part of the jurisdictional transfer agreement was that we gave them $225,000 for their water main. And then the bids came in high last year when they did it. And so they still want to go along with the project. And then there's ARPA funds that were available from the county to assist with the relocation of their water main. And so I think what they were looking for in this agreement is to kind of combine the everything together that we had with our jurisdictional agreement plus the ARPA fund agreement, and just make sure everybody, I think, was kind of on the same page, and that we were on board with their improvements.
Any questions? Again, this was something that we tried to do a year or so ago, correct?
Correct.
And at that time, they weren't interested in it.
Right.
But at that time, we didn't have this ARPA money either.
Right. So,
Okay.
So we kind of held off on the project. We were wanting to actually do it this fall, but we hold off, or we're going to move it to next year after they get their water main work done. And I think they've had bids taken on the water main, and they're looking to maybe do that work yet this year.
Okay. Any questions? All right, ready to vote? All those in favor say aye. Opposed, motion carries. All right, now we're ready for information items. First one's 2A, project summaries. Go ahead, Jerry, you can lead us on those.
Sure. So the first one is the Brand 2 bridge that was out by Stringtown. And so this is the existing picture. This isn't, so I'd like to show this picture first. And so this is what it looked like back in probably March or whatever. And then, so this is what it looked like after it was opened up. We opened it up September 10th, I think was the date. And so it turned out really nice. So I just got some pictures here. You see the riprap and everything. Just kind of that's from the north side of it, of the bridge. And then there's a couple pictures from the roadway. So so it all turned out pretty good. So everybody's happy that was open back up because that's kind of major thoroughfare there to that. So we are working on kind of final documentation and final payment on that project. So it is going to be a little bit over what the bid price was. We had to get some additional piles when we were driving the piles because they weren't long enough, and so that was early on in the project.
Any questions on that? Member Thompson?
I can't get my button on. Do you have to pull the old ones out and then re-stick them in? You can't just add to them, right?
No. Yeah, I think they were concrete pile and
So you got
everything.
some
So they
extras
just
now?
what's that?
So you got some extras now?
Not quite.
All right. Okay, next project.
So actually, that's not this. So I don't really have any pictures of the next project, but I'll give you kind of an update on those. So the Meadows Road project, that's our big project going from Lexington to Route 24, and that's moving along. They're actually the next 3 days they're going to put 2 lifts of binder on some more of the aggregate. So by the end of the week, they should have 4.5 miles paved with binder. And then they started putting down ag shoulders on the north end where they had the binder completed. And there's some additional dirt work to do. And I think there's like 1 culvert pipe left to do. So that project's moving along. They're in the stage now where they're getting a lot of production with putting in gravel and hot mix and that type of thing. So it'll be opened up no problem by winter. We are going to hold off on the surface lift until next year. Kind of let everything settle out, make sure we didn't miss any tile, and make sure we didn't have any issues. And that way we're not paving also in really cold temperatures, and we'll just come back in the spring and put the final 1.5 inch lift of hot mix on there, plus the gravel shoulders, and then we can clean up anything that needs to be done.
Will that cause an issue with snow removal
Nope.
as far as damaging the edges or
No.
anything?
Nope. No,
All right.
it should work out, and then if it does, then we have the opportunity to repair it if needed. But
All right.
we'll go ahead and stripe it and sign it and everything as well.
All right. Any questions on that? Okay, next project.
And then, so the next project was Townline Road going from Tazewell County line to 122. And so that project's fairly complete. All the paving's been done. We're waiting to stripe it, and we put safety shoulders on there. So they're putting, they had to put rumble strips down, and then we'll completely done. But so yeah, that was good to get that project done before the major harvest traffic was going. So that turned out really good.
All right.
And then I do have some pictures of a couple other projects that aren't really county related; they're township related. So the first one here is I don't know if you guys remember, we had a project where we're doing riprap around a bridge to prevent scour. So this was what they call the Bandsaw Bridge, which is just a little bit north and west of Colfax. And so they came in and put all this riprap, basically dug it out. You can kind of see here, there was 3 foot of silt and mud in here that they dug out. And so they dug it out all the way across the channel. And then put in 3 foot of riprap all the way down through there. And so, so I just got a couple pictures of that. We went about 10 to 15 foot from the edge of the bridge and the sides there. And so, so this was just taken the other day. So this is kind of on the south side of the bridge. And so, because like a lot of the water was just started to kind of erode the north side there and kind of hitting this corner over here. And so, so they get, I think they got that done in about 3 weeks. Time they dug it out, got all the dirt hauled away, and then hauled the riprap back in. And so we have another one of these to do down in Mount Hope Township, and we've taken a bid on it, but the contractor hasn't started on that project yet. And then this is a project is out in Anchor Township, and this is a Township Bridge Fund project. And so H.J. Apple's doing this, and so they have all the walls poured, and so they're working on forming the top, and they should probably be pouring that by the end of the week. So I just got a few pictures of that. So this is I think it's a double barrel 10 by 7, if I remember right. Or no, maybe actually 10 by 10. So they formed it up, poured the walls, and then and they got the center wall poured there. So so they'll have to pour the top and get it all backfilled, and then there's some road work and ditch work they have to do yet. So.
Any comments or questions? Member Thompson?
Am I over my limit yet?
Pardon me?
Am I over my limit yet?
No.
So I had a couple questions on a different area on a road, actually a township road where it intersects Route 9. I don't know if that's appropriate now or. So-
You're done, right? With your,
Yep, I'm done. Yes.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, first of all, I noticed yesterday that you'd put like a banner on the signpost on 2600 and not Route 9.
Yes.
I think that was obvious, and it helps highlight the stop sign. And that's where the incident happened this summer, where the truck blew through the intersection. I mean, it was very noticeable that the signage posted. The other concern I have is on 2100 where it intersects Route 9, coming from like Cornerstone, in that subdivision, people are not stopping. And I don't know, I've talked to the sheriff about additional patrol, but I didn't know if we could do some additional signage there. My wife drives that road every day, and I mean, it's like every day there's somebody pulling out in front of her or darting across, and it's a real safety concern. And I don't know if there's additional things that we could do there that would help highlight the need to stop and be cautious, because it's a disaster waiting to happen.
Sure, we can talk to the road commissioner and see what he's willing to do, but maybe we can get some of those reflections.
And you know, with the subdivision out there now, the traffic is
Right.
significantly greater than it used to be. I think it actually used to be a gravel road, probably 10 years ago, I know several years ago, but, and then they upgraded it when that was put in, but,
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen it myself, people are just, it's just busy, you know.
Yeah, I think the road commissioner even says if he tries to work on that road, he just closes it because there's just so much traffic and they don't slow down.
Yeah, it's bad. So
So-
anyway, I think that would be great if we could look into doing something there. So thank you.
Sure.
I also believe there's kind of a rise right there
Yeah, coming from the,
the south of here, north.
yeah,
or
well, I mean,
either way,
coming,
it's,
coming east on Route 9. I
Right.
mean, it's not a good situation. And then people, again, just don't heed like they should. So,
All right. Any other questions for Jerry? All right. Very good. So now we are ready for Mr. Dick, Building and Zoning. First item is 5B1. Request approval of an amendment to the Pollution Control Facilities section of the McQueen County Code as requested by the Ecology Action Center. And I would entertain a motion for that. Member Rogel, second member Wachinski. I do know that Mr. Brown is here if we have any questions. Otherwise, Phil, go ahead and take it away.
The force behind this amendment has to do with a application that we're anticipating for a solid waste transfer station by Henson Disposal off of Bunn Street, south of Bloomington there. And the main amendment has to do with allowing a hearing officer to conduct the public hearing. And Chris Spanos, Cassie Taylor, and Michael Brown were instrumental in getting this thing done. And Michael Brown is the person who is the solid waste coordinator and did the research on getting some of the other counties who have hearing officers language from their code to incorporate into ours. I think it would be helpful for Michael to explain this at this time.
All right, Mr. Brown, come up here if you would.
Good morning, thank you. The basic gist is just the hearing officer provides additional expertise and experience for the hearing control process and overseeing the hearing itself. These processes have become very complex. There's a lot of moving parts, and there is a lot of responsibility on our part as the county to do everything correctly, and if not, it can result in problems in siting a facility. And so this hearing officer would help provide that expertise and oversight to just add to what myself and the county staff bring to the process.
We don't normally have a lot of these hearings.
We do not.
Again, in the past few years, maybe I think we've had one or maybe two, I can't remember, but so it's not a case where this person will be working monthly or whatever.
It is a short term, just for the process itself.
Right.
And yeah, short term contract.
Okay. Anybody have any questions? All right.
Just as a point of information, the hearing officer would be paid from the application fee, so it wouldn't be any expense to the county.
All right. Ready to vote? All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right. All right. Next item then is B1B, request approval of a decommissioning agreement. First, I'd entertain a motion to get it on the floor. Member Wachinski, second, Member Bell. Okay, Phil, you want to start us out with this?
Yeah, again, Chris Spanos and Cassie Taylor and I were working on this, and because it's primarily a legal document negotiated with one of the particular wind farms, Chris Spanos did the lead on this, and I'd ask him to speak at this time.
What you have before you is the proposal that we received from the wind farm company, amended by me. It is not yet agreed to by the wind farm company. I think there's a reasonable probability that there may yet be some additional changes between now and next week. They know they have until next week. There's a possibility that we may have to ask you to come in for a stand up for some final changes, but the majority of what you have in front of you is what we intend to present to them upon your approval today.
Any questions, Member Klein?
Excuse my scratchy voice, but what we have in front of us is a sort of boilerplate, right? Because
I wouldn't call it a boilerplate when it's gone through a series of changes and amendments, but
no, I mean to say that this isn't a specific agreement because we just sort of have underlines for the names of the wind farm. This is a standardized agreement that could be adapted situationally. Is that correct?
I wouldn't necessarily call it standardized, but I think it's customized.
Okay.
I think there's a difference, but yes, it could be used in other wind farms down the road or some variation of it as
Right.
we move forward.
Okay, so it's a question, are we approving this particular agreement or a an approach to these agreements?
It would just be this particular agreement at this time.
Okay.
Remember, there's an AMA in place now. The law has changed since this wind farm was initially permitted. So there are different obligations today than there were then. Most of those obligations we've tried to incorporate into this, this agreement.
So the cause of my question was that, in the upper portion, when Ms. Ziegler mentioned the names of the companies, those names are not listed here for us, and that's why I wanted to make a clarification.
They are not at this point. In fact, I just noticed today that the escrow agreement, when we accepted changes so that you didn't get a complete, fully lined out, so we didn't put out there in the public what the lawyer was doing.
Sure.
Accepted a blank that was up there by the names, and when Ms. Ziegler and I were talking on the phone, I was looking at a copy with a blank there, didn't realize she was not. There's actually, the identity of the actual company is yet to be added to that and verified.
Can we follow up on some of the questions that Ms. Ziegler brought up? Do we want to talk about those?
If you have questions that involve a legal opinion, I will invite you to come to my office and sit down with me at your convenience, and a little bit of my convenience too, probably, to discuss any of those legal opinions. I'm not inclined to give you legal advice, as we've said many
Sure.
times in a public.
I'm not sure if this is a legal question, but the question that was raised about original condition, about who asserts that opinion, is that something?
I think
can
that
answer.
would amount to a legal opinion.
Okay.
We would end up then putting public argument out there, and I'm not in a position, wouldn't recommend we do that now.
So I would mention again that this agreement pretty much pertains to the Twin Groves and the White Oak wind farms. Again, since that, the AEMA was put in place, so we're really only talking about those two. Right, correct?
I believe this is just the Twin Groves. It is not the White Oak. That's a different company and a different situation.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Although we may reasonably contemplate a similar agreement with that one down the road, a similar approach.
Okay. Member Thompson?
I guess I would, how can we get addressed all of the concerns that Ms. Ziegler had pointed out? They seemed rather reasonable to me, and
Sorry, I can't hear you very well.
I get that a lot, I'm sorry. I was wondering how we could proceed to get all the issues that Ms. Ziegler had raised and incorporated. They seem to be very reasonable and frankly worthy of implementing as well. And
I think the majority of the issues that she raised this morning have already been incorporated into what we were proposing.
Okay.
There are a couple things left, like identifying the number of turbines. As we sit here today, I just don't know the exact number of
I think it's like
turbines, but
254.
I imagine we could find that out real quick. Phil probably knows it off the top of his head. Things like that.
260. I was close.
We'll adjust as we move forward and negotiate the final agreement. And that's why I say I think more likely than not, we're going to have to come back for a stand-up, at which time we will provide you with what we propose as the final agreement, which will, if there's anything left to incorporate of what has been proposed, we will, of course, consider those recommendations and then either incorporate them or give you a good reason why we don't think we should. I don't think I've heard anything that I wouldn't recommend, but it's possible. And remember, too, that's just one side of it. They're going to have a different side, a different version of what they want. And, this agreement is, well, again, I'd be glad to sit down and talk to you in more detail from a legal opinion. And
Yeah.
I don't want to give you what I think are my strengths and
Understand.
weaknesses
Right.
of our position here in this forum.
Yes, understand. Okay, thank you.
Member Klein?
Go ahead.
Yes, please.
Okay, Member Wachinski first and then Member Klein.
Yeah, I just kind of want to reiterate the question that I was going to ask Ms. Ziegler earlier. I'm interested in an opinion on who the Farm Bureau believes should be the one to determine the land that it's been restored. That's my question. I'm just curious to know what their thinking is, or how they would prefer that.
With your approval, I would ask Ms. Ziegler to come back up to the podium, if she would, to the chair. And does anyone object? Okay. So I don't want to misspeak, but you pretty much would like to know who you would recommend makes that decision. And again, I can see, unless we have something specific, in the future being litigation or whatever, because my opinion is my farm was this way before you started, and you're saying it wasn't, and so I think we need to have something pretty specific.
Yeah, well, our position is we'd like the landowners to have input in the process. I don't know that the county or the company would necessarily be comfortable saying that they get the only say in it. And, like Mr. Soldner said, it could be he said, she said kind of, or he said kind of thing about, what was the original condition. And I believe, the definition of original condition is that it's returned to a farmable state so that they can farm it again, because that's what it was prior. So I don't know if you need to say what the soil condition was before, or, there's a lot of issues you could get into. Is it compaction and rutting? Is it erosion control? Is it repair of tile lines? There's a number of things that could be incorporated in what constitutes the original condition. And like I said, we'd like to see landowners have some say in it. I don't know that it should be their decision alone. And part of the challenge here is these wind turbines, the leases in most cases it's a 30-year lease. They signed a 30-year lease. So we're about 14 years into those leases, I believe. So we've got a ways to go, another 16 years. At the end of that 30-year lease, the wind farm has the right to extend it for an additional 2 10-year periods. So if they exercise that option, it could be 50 years. So 50 years from the date they signed that lease, what was the condition of the farm at that point? Is
Right.
anybody going to remember?
Right.
We could be in the next generation of landowners. The land could have been sold. There's a lot of unknowns. So I don't know
So
if that
more
really
of
answers your question.
So more of a collaboration between those
Yeah. And,
three.
maybe it's just mutual agreement of the county and the landowner.
Okay.
Or the company might want their say in there too. So agreement of the 3 entities.
Okay.
And if somebody's not satisfied, then they have to go to potentially litigation, which we would hope could be avoided.
All right.
So is the state's IEMA spell out anything as far as what we're talking about, condition before the project, or do you know?
I don't know that it defines original condition, but it is a lot more specific in what they have to remove, what they have to, it does define compaction and rutting, repair of tile lines, that they have to put topsoil back if topsoil is removed, that kind of thing. It's probably a 25-page document, and a good chunk of it deals with decommissioning. So
Okay.
there's a lot more specifics in that agreement, but this wind farm was constructed before that was in place, so you can't, we can't tie their hands to an agreement that wasn't in place at the
Right.
time.
So I've gotten a couple calls about in the 30 years or 50 years, What if the farmer wants to leave a driveway, a gravel driveway now that goes to a tower? Will they have an opportunity to ask to have that done? It's possible that after the wind tower is removed, the farmer might want to leave the concrete pad that's there. Maybe they could put a grain bin or something on it. So those are things, again, I think we need to figure out how that's going to be decided. If the farmer's going to be able to sign off and say, this is all I want you to do, and I don't know whether that's spelled out in this agreement and exactly how we could add that to the agreement.
Well, if you're asking me, my personal opinion is I don't know that the county needs to get that granular. So each landowner in their lease, there should be, I can't speak to what was negotiated between the landowner and the company, because those leases are private. I haven't seen the full lease of every landowner. But usually there's some, at least in the more recent ones, the landowner has the option to have the road left. If they want to leave the access road, it can be left. I haven't heard of anybody that wants to keep the concrete pad, but I suppose that could be in there too. Again, I don't know that the county needs to insert itself necessarily in that part of the agreement, because there is an underlying agreement, a lease between the company and the landowner. And in a lot of cases, that language may control. This is designed to be another layer to obligate the company to take the turbines down when the time comes.
Okay. Member Klein?
I suppose I have sort of an operation question, but this conversation brings up another issue about whether original condition would, and that blanket term original condition could be countervened by individual lease agreements. So, I understand this is a legal issue and Mr. Spanos doesn't want us to go too far in this conversation, but I think that might need to be reconsidered insofar as individual lease agreements might stipulate something different than original condition, right? If the person wishes to keep the pad or wishes to keep the driveway or whatever, that I think that language might need to be reconsidered. My kind of operation question is, if I could just ask Mr. Spanos or Mr. Dick, what are if we are accepting the fact that there need to be changes, what are we agreeing to today?
Didn't mean to mislead you. This is the agreement that I recommend you approve and that we propose.
Okay.
What I'm saying to you is I would not be surprised if they come back and say, I won't agree to this, or in addition to this, we want something else. So there is a chance, a reasonable probability that we're going to be back here again at stand-up with a slightly amended agreement for you to review and approve. But as far as if they were to sign this, we're talking about the decommissioning agreement now, just the decommissioning agreement. If they were to sign this as is and we fill in the right project owner, I think this is a perfectly acceptable agreement under the circumstances and is what we've been talking about.
So if we decline to approve it with some concerns that we have, this is in the hands of the wind farm now, right, for consideration?
I'm sorry, I don't follow you. If you decline to approve it, then we don't have a proposed agreement to make to them. So we're back to step one, right? I have shared this with them with the understanding that it will be going to you.
Okay, that was my question.
For review, so that, and you have a right to change it, to make amendments if you think that's appropriate. Otherwise, if you vote and to approve it, I can let them know, okay, the Land Use Committee has now approved this agreement. We'll just continue to negotiate on it. If they come back and say, all right, Land Use has approved it, assuming that it would go through executive then for executive committee approval, and then on to the board, and the board approves it, then we've got an agreement. If in the interim between now and say next Tuesday, because that's the cutoff to get something to you for the stand-up agenda, they were to suggest and we were to, I don't want to to say agree, but if I were to look at it and say that's an acceptable change, then we'd have to come back to you with an amended agreement. But at this point, I think this is a perfectly acceptable agreement on behalf of the county. It covers all of the issues, in my opinion, that we have addressed here today to the extent we can cover them, and go from there.
Mr. Dick had something you wanted to say. Go ahead.
I was here when we approved these original wind turbines, and it was part of the agreement during the public hearing process that every lease have a contingency in it that it would be removed upon the completion of the action of the turbines. And so it was anticipated at that time that the county wouldn't be involved at all, but that this lease agreement would protect the landowners. So every lease that they had at that time included that.
All right, Ms. Taylor?
Thank you. I just would like to reiterate that the reason that we're going through this process today is that the wind farm that we're speaking of predates a lot of the regulations that were put into place through AMA. And then I also was going to speak to the comment that Mr. Dick just made, that the county is not a party to these wind farms. This is an agreement between the wind farm company and the individual owners. And so these protections that we're putting in place with decommissioning and escrow are further layers of protections for our citizens of McLean County. But the individual owner of that farm will need to speak to the wind farm as far as how they construe back to an original state. And so I think that would be a separate argument through the courts between that landowner and the wind farm.
All right. Any other questions or discussion? Member Rogal?
So, and this is probably one of those legal opinions you don't want to answer here. Which one would then be held which one would it fall to? So if they all have individual agreements and their individual agreement is different than this, is it their individual agreement that would be in place, or would it this that came at a later time be the one that would be taking its place?
Remember how we got here. The original plan, which evolves out of the findings of fact by the ZBA, contemplated that they would put forth, after however many years it was, 12 years, that they would put forth some financial security to ensure that the decommissioning is funded, right? They failed to do that. The county didn't want to get involved at all initially. As we looked through the findings of fact and the law and the current status of AMA, which requires the county to be the beneficiary of the security fund, as I recall it, it became obvious to us that in order to get this done, plus their resistance to establish a single escrow account on behalf of each individual landowner just wasn't cost effective or was cost prohibitive. So we ended up in this place where we had the Farm Bureau, who has been insistent, understandably so, about the county making them establish a financial security fund. We've had numerous conversations over the last several years to try and compel them to put forth or come forth with some sort of security. So now what we're doing here is we're trying to establish that security. And the way to get that done was to make the county the single beneficiary of the escrow account, but not impose upon the county any duties or obligations beyond which it would ordinarily have under the original agreement. Now, that's not exactly what we're going to end up doing here, because at the end of the day, since it's the county who can make a claim on the escrow account, the county will have some administrative responsibility for making a claim, unfortunately. I don't know if there's any way around it. If the county's going to be the only beneficiary, the only one who can draw on those funds, is the county. So in the event if they default or don't do what they're supposed to do, and there has to be a claim on the county, there has to be at least some minimum procedure to establish what would happen, how that's going to come about. What are the minimum requirements for the county to make a claim upon that escrow account? That's what this decommissioning agreement is trying to do. I think as it effectively spells out the situations, at least I think it does, when the county can make a claim on that account. And the primary responsibility for decommissioning a tower, if the company doesn't do it, would fall with the landowner. The county is not taking on an obligation to necessarily decommission them, incur that expense, and then make a claim on the escrow account. Although, if we get to that situation where it's not getting done, and the county decides or determines that it's in the county's best interest for them to do so, we try to leave that as an option at the sole discretion of the county to exercise. But the bottom line still remains that it's going to, if it doesn't happen by the company, if the company doesn't do it, the landowners, it's going to fall on the landowners. If the landowners either incur the expense of the decommissioning, or if they enter into an agreement with a contractor to incur that expense, we tried to build in the ability of them to make a claim on the county, basically the county, hey, make this claim, and then the county would have to submit that claim to the escrow. And then the escrow agreement, which we haven't even started talking about yet, would then be required would require the escrow agent to make that payment to the county, which would then distribute that money. The concern of the county is going to be making sure that money gets used for decommissioning and not for a trip to Jamaica, right? So we tried to build in some assurances there that the county's not going to make this claim and ask for that money unless it's going for decommissioning. And probably the best way to do that would be to make sure either that the decommissioning is done and the landowner then has either paid for or has an obligation to pay for that decommissioning, or that the payment itself becomes contingent upon there being a binding agreement to do the decommissioning. So I don't know if I tried to stay away from legal opinions and just report facts in that little dissertation I just gave you, or soliloquy. But the bottom line is that's what we're trying to do with this agreement. We think this agreement does that adequately, but there's a chance that it will be subject to some more negotiations.
Any other questions? And I know you're all aware of it. If it does pass here, it does go to exec, and it does go to the full board, so you will have opportunity to ask questions again if you like. So are we ready to vote? Member Bell?
I'm not a lawyer, okay? But what is your definition of a LLC? I have my layman definition of a LLC, but I know it can be used for other things too.
It's a limited liability company. That's what LLC stands for. You want to know what it does or what it protects it from? If you got about 4 or 5 hours, we can sit down and talk about it.
Okay. Any other discussion? All right, we're ready to vote. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, Mr. Dick, B1C, escrow agreement. Request approval of an escrow agreement. Motion, Member Rogel, second Member Wachinski. All right.
This is a follow-up to the decommissioning agreement, and I'll defer again to Chris Spanos.
He handed it over to you.
Okay. What I was trying to do, talking to Cassie there, I apologize. This agreement, based on the conversation today, probably should be amended, and we should have a motion to amend this agreement to include the number of towers in the escrow agreement itself, so that the calculation is clear before anybody puts pen to paper on this. So I think it would, you might want to make a motion to amend and add that, as well as, I suppose you could add in your amendment that we verify the name of the owner of the property. That may also need to be amended, so.
Is that a motion to amend? Is that a second? All right.
I apologize. Can I ask for clarification on what the motion to amend is, the language that I would be putting in here?
So, if I were
Right.
making the motion, I would make a motion to amend hey, show. I've been so good, I kept hitting the button, I had it done exactly. I would. Oh, we're soft-spoken. I've been called a lot of things, but never soft-spoken. So. I would move to amend the agreement to include the number of turbines in, if you have a copy of it, paragraph 2. Do you need the specific language? All right. And that we would verify and include the appropriate owner of the property. Although I will tell you, going on beyond this, who puts that money in there? If it said, Bob Jones, and Bob Jones has nothing to do with the wind farm. Once that money's in the escrow account, we don't really care who it comes from, because it's not coming out until the decommissioning or the county says, give me the money. So really, I understand the concern, and technically we want to be correct, obviously. But if we get the wrong, one LLC and not the other, as long as that LLC, as long as this agreement says 200 and whatever turbines times $25,000, and that money's deposited, once it's deposited, that LLC can't come in and take it again. Nobody can take that money until the conditions of the escrow account have been met. So, but we will, once this motion is made and seconded, we will make sure that we check into that and get that adjusted.
Just a point of clarification, you said the landowner, you meant the LLC.
I'm sorry, I don't remember when I said landowner,
Okay,
but.
and you meant the LLC, so
Probably.
okay.
So we have an amendment, a motion to amend by Member Wachinski, a second by Member Klein. Any discussion on the amendment? Ready to vote on the amendment? All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Amendment carries. So now we're ready to vote on the motion as amended. Any more discussion on that? And we had a motion maker and a second for that. So all those in favor of that say aye. Opposed? Okay. Okay, next item then is B2A. And you want to read that off, Phil? You want everybody else to read it, or you want to just comment on it?
I just wanted to let you know that October is Planning Month, as designated by the American Planning Association. And as part of that program, planners are going to have something at the
Says government center.
farm on the facility on Main Street on the Saturday of the 21st. And also, we're going to have an event here on the 14th where each planner from our Bloomington Normal area will speak about what they do and what they see as future planning for our community. And I just wanted to let you know that that's going to happen. And the main beneficiaries of that meeting is going to be the planners. So if you want to know what the area planners are thinking and what planners are doing in the community, please think about attending.
All right. So before we go on with Ms. Taylor and our budget items, is there any other questions for Mr. Dick? All right. If not, then we are ready for 5C, Cassie Taylor, County Administrator. C1A, motion would be request approval of fiscal 2023 recommended budget for the Building and Zoning Department 0038. Who wants to make that motion? Member Wachinski, second, Member Thompson. All right,
Thank you, Chair Solner. I would direct your attention to the PowerPoint slides. I just have a few comments to make as an overview, and then, of course, if you have specific questions as we move through these budgets, please let me know. So the Building and Zoning Budget Overview, we have a brief description there of what the Building and Zoning Department does for those that are new on the committee. Their budget consists of 68% in salaries, 2% in supplies, and 30% in services. For this fiscal year, the revenue lines, we saw a 30% increase in the filing fees and zoning cases and a 63% reduction in permit fees from the previous fiscal year. The revenue reduction in permits is related to an expected decrease in permit fees from wind farms. The county has benefited from many wind farms being developed in previous years, and so this is just a reflection of that slowdown. For expenses, there is a small increase to the budget from 2022, a 7% increase overall. The increase in those expenses are accounted for in increases in salaries as a recommendation from our compensation study, and then also the anticipated increase in costs from supplies. As we know, supply chain costs are going up. And that is it for my notes on building and zoning. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer, or Mr. Dick could also assist me with that.
Member Klein?
Thank you. I'm referring to the second page of the budget under item 0706.0001, contract services. Could you talk us through a little bit, in the last several years, you've got a budget of $40,000, and that hasn't been used, and we're rebudgeting $40,000. Can you talk about what that $40,000 is intended for? Contract services.
Is that the surcharge?
No.
Oh, let's see.
It's a second item under services.
And if you only, it's a reimbursement fund, right? So I've just received confirmation from both Kathy Dreyer and Mr. Dick that that line 407.0154 is the abandoned property program. That is a reimbursement program. And so that is to tear down abandoned properties, and it is received revenue after we have expended those costs. So if we do not expend those costs, then there's no revenues to be put into that line, and that is why the 2022 actual amount shows a zero. So we put that in the budget in anticipation of need, so that we don't have to come back and ask for a budget amendment.
Okay.
So again, there's not a revenue on that side either, though. So I guess what I'm getting is, if we decided to take part of that $40 to reduce our overall budget, it really wouldn't work because there isn't any money in there.
It would be a zero sum.
Right.
We'd reduce the revenue and the expenses.
Right, okay. All
The
right,
corresponding revenue is budgeted if received in 4070154.
On page 1.
okay. There we go. Abandoned property program. Okay. All right. Any other questions? All right. Do you have another slide?
Nope.
Are ready to
Not for
vote
that.
then? Okay, so then we're ready to vote on that, that motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is C1B, request approval of fiscal year 2023 recommended budget for the Solid Waste Management Fund 0159 on, who wants to make that motion? Member Bell, second. Member Wachinski. Ms. Taylor?
Thank you, Chair Solner. I only have one slide for this budget. This refers to our funding and our relationship with the Ecology Action Center. Their mission is to inspire and assist the community in creating, strengthening, and preserving a healthy environment. We had a slight increase to their budget from 2022. That was due to a COLA increase per the 2022 Solid Waste Program Agreement, and that was adjusted per that contract that is already in place. Otherwise, it's a pretty standard budget.
Any comments or questions? All right, ready to vote. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, C1C, request approval of the Highway Department 0055 fiscal year 2023 budget, including C1 Highway Fund 10120, C2 Bridge Matching Fund 10121, County Matching Fund 0122, and Motor Fuel Tax Fund 0123, and the 5-year capital improvement plan. All those, we're making a motion to adopt those. Who wants to make that motion? Member Thompson, second. Member Rogel. Okay, Ms. Taylor?
Thank you again. So we're going to handle this a little differently. I'm going to give a couple of brief slides on the overview of the Highway Department. I believe I only have one slide as an overview, and then I'm going to turn this over to Jerry Stokes to explain further. So our Highway Department has several funds as described by Chair Solner. The overall expenses of the Highway Department consist of 70% for salaries, 3% for supplies, services account for 15% of the budget, and then capital assets and projects are 12%. And this budget consists of very large sums, and so I think there might be more questions about that. And so Mr. Stokes has compiled several slides to delineate the differences between each of those funds. So I will turn it over to Mr. Stokes.
Thank you. So our first fund is the Highway Fund 120, and that's our general operating fund where most of our day-to-day operation expenses occur. And so a lot of that revenue comes from property tax, but we also receive revenue from commodities that we sell to the township, such as signs and pipe that we have on hand for that. We also do engineering for the townships for their motor fuel tax, and out of their motor fuel tax, we take percentages that comes back to the Highway Department for our time spending for our time for figuring out how to expend or helping them expend their motor fuel tax allotments that they get each year. And then we also receive revenue from our overweight permits and our entrance permit and work permits that when we have a utility that needs to come out on the county right away. So the highway fund revenue between 22 and 23 is an increase of about $211,000, and that's basically just because the EAV increased, the tax rate stayed the same. And then so I have the next few slides are kind of just broken down into the 500, 600, 700 line items. So the 500 line items are for salaries and for our full-time and seasonal employees, plus our health insurance rates are included in that amount. The going on to the 600 line items, so I'm just going to highlight some of the major ones. I'm not going to cover all the line items, but the big ones, gas and fuel, and that diesel fuel that we have. we're already in the red for 2022. So, you know, there's going to have to be a budget amendment or something like that at the end of the year. But, you know, it's based on usage, you know, how much we use. We track it. So I look at how much we use on a yearly basis and, you know, what the cost increase and everything. So, so that's where I came up with the number of, I think it was like 440,000 for 2023, which is, I think, is up from like 280 in 2022. So, significant increase there. But, and I base that on like diesel at $5 a gallon and gasoline at $4.50 a gallon. So I know things are down a little bit since I did the budget, but, we don't know what's going to happen next year as well. And if we have a major winter, then we're going to be, you know, using a lot of fuel in that regard. And then the other one is group purchasing, and that is some of the commodities that we actually buy for the townships. And so we buy if sometimes we'll do work for the townships and we'll buy culverts and aggregate and that comes out of this fund. One other thing that comes out of this fund is the salt prices. So we handle the salt for for some of the townships that use salt and some of the municipalities. And so on the county side, we pay that all at MFT, and we send out letters early on, actually probably back in March, and seeing how much salt that we need to carry for those entities. And so the salt price in 2022 was $65.69. I just found out yesterday that the price for the winter for 2022 and 23 is going to be $85.34. So, so there's, you know, a significant increase there. And, you know, we were kind of expecting that after the winter we had and some of the supply issues and fuel costs and everything. Moving on to the 700 line items. The first one there is additional schooling and conferences. We've got a lot of new staff members, and we need to get them trained in certain areas, especially some our AutoCAD program that we use, our drafting program that we use called MicroStation. You know, it's a really powerful program. We can do a lot with it, and we just need to get some additional training on that as we're moving forward. The 744 with the maintenance and grounds, we're looking at, you know, a lot of things, but we need a new perimeter fencing out there at the highway department. We're looking at new digital radios for all the trucks. And we're actually working on some of this stuff now, depending on the cost wise. We may pull some of that into 2022, but there's some other things that we're looking to do out there at the highway department. And then the mandatory fees, it's going back to the Brand Bridge that we just discussed earlier. We actually the bridge was actually supposed to be done in 2020 or 2021, and it got delayed because we had some environmental issues. And so we have to pay the IDNR mitigation fee for those environmental issues for, it was mussels. So that's actually an agreement that we had, and we haven't, so that's going to be paid here in 2023. As far as the 800 line items, that's mainly our capital expenses. We're looking at putting a cold storage shed up either at the highway department or our property that we have on Route 9, which we call McLean County East. We have quite a few acres out there that we might be able to do something with. We're pretty tight at our facility, at our location there at the highway department. And since this is going to be a cold storage, this is really going to store like mainly stuff for the winter, but store trailers or some of the machines that we're not using on a, you know, monthly basis type of thing. So we're looking at that. And then on the 850 side, which is our equipment line item, I did put in front of you kind of a listing of our equipment as far as we're looking at getting 3 new tandem trucks, an end loader. As we discussed last month, we're having a lot of issue with trying to get pickup trucks, and then we got some additional trailers in there as well. So we might not be able to get 3 trucks. You know, we're hoping to get 3 trucks, but there's, you know, a chance we might only be able to get 2 trucks. Last couple few years, we've been getting Kenworths. We may look at going back to looking with another dealers on the international side, because we've been speccing out the same engine, same transmission and everything. So basically all it's going to change is the cab. So that might be something where we look to do. So we're kind of talking to the vendors as we go along here to see how many slots they're going to have available and just see how long it's going to take to get these trucks in place. Because we have trucks for 2022, but we're waiting on the beds and everything to get put on them so we can use them this winter. So, anyway, so there's kind of a listing of what we have and kind of the pricing that we have that's in there for the budget that you can look at. Any questions on Highway 120, or do we want to?
Member Thompson?
2 questions. One, your shed out at the east facility, do we have power out there?
We have, I think we do have power out there. Because it used to be they used to have a hot mix plant there, a temporary hot mix plant when they were doing a lot of work over there. So there is a power capabilities there.
Yeah, I'm sure it'd be more expensive to put it at the main facility, right? Because then you'd have land acquisitions and things like that to deal with.
Right.
It's just physically not.
Yeah, I think it depends on the size of the building. If we go out to east, we can get a lot larger buildings and we can store a lot more. And I think it'd really benefit us in the future. If we stay there at the highway department, we're probably looking at a smaller footprint, basically. Still get what we want to do because there's just a lot of machines we have sitting outside in the elements all the time.
And these are, again, you said these are machines that you're not routinely there.
It's
kind of like your combine. You park it and you leave it for the
9 months.
No.
It's more like our trailers, our semi-trailers, mowers, things that are seasonally used, our wood chipper, crack sealer, and that type of stuff.
Okay. You were talking about the trucks then. I mean, there's quite a bit of, at least from my perspective, when you have the same brand, it becomes a lot easier to maintain parts inventory and going back and forth between, I guess if you can't get them, that's a problem too. But then maybe there's a reason you can't get one as opposed to the other.
That's
I think we talked about that as well. So
right. Yeah, I think everybody likes the Kenworths that we have out there, and they seem to last well. Probably have better trade-in value once we do trade them in. So,
well, from a service standpoint too, you really have no options anymore in Bloomington, do you?
Right. So that is something we're
pretty
kind
much
of thinking
is a daily
about.
routine with the new systems.
Right.
Having towed mine to town twice in the last week. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's good, but I know if they cost more, I mean, I get it. There's savings as well on the other side of that from just homogeneous products in line and
Sure.
inventories and things like that. So, thanks.
All right. Member Klein?
Thank you. Jerry, I just have a couple of questions. So can you help me understand? So I'm going back to the 400 numbers, the revenue side of your department on the first page. The unappropriated fund balance going into 2023 looks like $2.6 million. Is that correct?
Yes.
So that's unappropriated funds that roll forward into your 2023 budget. Do I understand that correctly?
Yes.
Is that an unusually high number? It seems to be an unusually high number over the last couple of years. I mean, assume maybe you'll pull upon this at the end when your gas bill comes. These are sorts of things that the money that can be spent for overages.
Right. We have a fairly decent sized balance in there from where we received money from the wind farms. And so this money is actually going to get spent on the capital side for construction projects.
Sure.
So we're kind of expecting money from that as well. I mean, that's in the construction maintenance line as well.
Okay.
But from projects that we've had in in the past from the wind farm payments, from the Sapphire Sky wind farm payment that we received. That's all kind of included in that.
Okay, so it's $2 million
balance.
more than normal because of the wind farm payments.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I have more questions. When I put my glasses on, my students know I'm serious. Okay, so you mentioned on line 718, the schooling and conferences, it's up to 13,000. It's 160% over last year. That's all for AutoCAD. What is do you get to reduce external contracting services when your staff has better CAD training? How does that, I know how to use AutoCAD, it's terrifying. So, how would they use this? How does that affect the department?
So basically, this will allow, so everybody can use it. And so when we're drawing plans, so we do quite a bit of engineering in-house. We don't hire consultant firms for everything. We do mainly for structural stuff or maybe some bigger items. So we can, so we'll be designing and drawing all our resurfacing plans, any plans for the townships or any, fairly good-sized projects. We can go out and survey it, download the data, and then and draw up the plans, whether it's a mile worth of road and everything. So it'll be beneficial on that side because we won't be paying consultants to do that work.
Okay.
And
And so you anticipate in next year that will go back down to kind of an average level?
Yes. Yeah, we're bringing in a training, a person comes from our program's called MicroStation, and we're bringing in basically an instructor for a week.
Okay.
To do that.
To do a lot of stuff. Okay. Next question is in the 778 line, the administrative surcharges line. I don't think you addressed that in your talk. This is up by 338% over last year. It's currently budgeted at 54,400. What is that?
So that is a change that was made by administration to take a percentage of the cost for administrative surcharge, percentage of the entirety of the county, and apply that per department. And so that is reflective of the increases that we made on a percentage basis to each department. So we were under charging before.
Okay. So this is to exist in the county. That's what it's going to cost. Okay.
And
It's kind of a kickback.
Kickback.
Yeah, it's per fund.
Internal kickback.
It's per fund, so it as we go along here in the bridge and matching fund, it's a lot less than what it was in 2022. So it kind of balanced itself out a little bit. It was still an increase overall per department, but it does balance out per fund.
Okay. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, go ahead to the bridge fund.
So the bridge fund is used for county bridges and culverts, and a lot of times for if we're doing like a township bridge project using township bridge program funds, those are usually 80% state, 10% county, and 10% the township. And then we also do a lot of 50-50 joint culverts that we've brought through where a lot of times we're doing the work for the townships, and it's 50% townships, 50% county on those type of projects. So 68% comes from the revenue, and then the remaining revenue comes from the townships, and then the fund balance as well. So the revenue increase is around $205,000 for 2023, and the tax rate we did jump up the tax rate just a little bit in this fund, just because all the prices of everything are starting to increase, and we're seeing that on the bridge side, and so it seems like we always need a lot more money in the construction side in the bridge fund as compared to the other funds for whatever reason. So we always don't know what we're going to run across as far as emergencies and if the culverts fail and that type of thing. So that's where a lot of that increase is going to go. And so then we got the revenue from the joint culverts and from the townships there. On the 700 line items, so we'll start working on. So these projects usually take about a year to design, and so by the time they clear all the environmental and everything, so we'll start working on 2024 projects here, probably at the end of 2022 and 2023. we'll probably be bringing some engineering contracts through to start those projects. And typically we do like one county and one township bridge a year. Next year's probably just going to be one county bridge. I think we do have actually a 50-50 bridge culvert that we're looking at doing. That's a bigger project than we normally do at a 50-50 level, but I think we can make it work. And then on the 800 line items, we are looking at a county bridge project out by Colfax, and it's going to be probably $1.8 to $2 million project by the time it's all said and done. So, any questions on the bridge fund? Okay. So the matching fund, that's 122, is basically can only be used on projects where we're using federal funds or motor fuel tax funds. And so this all comes from the property tax, and it can only be spent on construction, engineering, or right-of-way. And so a lot of times what we're using this fund for is to match our federal projects that we're doing. If we're doing a resurfacing project, we're using matching funds to, because a lot of times those funds are 80% federal funds and then 20% county. And so we use that funding out of the matching fund for those projects. And so the revenue was around $106,000 increase, and that tax rate stayed the same, and just based on the EAV. And so we're looking at in 2023 spending $2.7 million out of construction. There's some money that was in 2022 that a couple of projects that we weren't going to get to here, so that money's going to basically roll over into 2023 numbers. So almost 100% of that fund goes to actual construction projects. Any questions on that one? All right, so next up's the motor fuel tax fund. And so we use this on all kinds of things from maintenance, engineering, and construction. And so we receive monthly allotments from the motor fuel tax, and it's kind of broken up into two parts. One is the existing MFT formula that's been around forever. And then the next one is called the Transportation Renewal Fund that started in July of 2019. So we also have county consolidated and Rebuild Illinois funds. And so on the 2023 budget, we're expecting around $300,000 a month just out of the Transportation Renewal Fund and existing MFT. So that's our total allotment. And then our county consolidated is kind of a supplemental allotment that IDOT gives. So they give the counties what they call county consolidated, and then the townships is it's called needy township, and so they go through a formula on the township side, but basically it's distributed the same way to us. And so the county consolidated acts as like two allotments to the county throughout the year, and sometimes we receive it twice, but usually it's a one-time payment to us that we use, that we get. And then the Rebuild Illinois funds, so that's part of the capital improvement program. And so we're using $4 million of it this year on the Meadows Road project from Lexington to Route 24 that we just talked about. And so we just last week we received our second allotment. So we have two allotments remaining. So we received the second one for 2022. So we have that money available that we're going to use on a future project, and so that'll help us out there. And then as far as the expenses and stuff go, so a lot of this gets used for maintenance, and so this is where all our oil and chip work comes from, as well as when we're buying our commodities, salt and paint and signs and posts and all that stuff comes out of the motor fuel tax and fund there, out of the 716 maintenance line. And so next month, I'll be bringing a maintenance resolution through that'll have what we're going to be spending on all those items. And then so we're on the capital assets. Like I said, a lot of that work's going for road and bridge projects. We probably will bring in an engineering agreement through here in the next couple months for a project to reuse the use the remaining RBI funds as we go along here, because those RBI funds have to be obligated by 2025, and so so that's like I said, all that 85% of the motor fuel tax is going to maintenance and construction. So any questions on the motor fuel tax? And then I also put in front of you is the capital improvement plan. There's a list of projects for the next 5 years, what we're looking in 2023. And there's also a map with it that kind of breaks down the locations of the projects and kind of the rough limits of the projects as we're going. So we've already started working on some of these projects for 2023. Especially some of the bigger ones, and so it looks like we're going to have another good year for projects.
Any questions on any of that? It's kind of a lot to digest. So we had a motion made and seconded to approve all those budget items, C1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Any more discussion? Member Thompson?
Not, just a comment. I mean, I've been driving throughout Gibson City back and forth. We've been hauling grain and just beating the you-know-what out of it. And I look at the plan that we have here for our county highways, and I commend you and your department for the high-quality highways that we have, because we had heard from the state, a couple months ago, about how their plan is, and the roads are abysmal at best. And so I just commend you guys for a job well done.
All right. No other questions, and are we ready to vote on all those? All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion's carry. Any other items, Ms. Taylor?
I do not, thank you.
Okay. Pardon me? Prior to the meeting, Jerry and I were discussing, you want to mention the issues that may be happening with railroad crossing out in eastern McLean County?
Sure. So I got a call from Norfolk Southern Railroad last week that they were going to come in here by the end of the week, and they were going to reconstruct some of the road crossings from Holder to Arrowsmith. And the engineering agreement that we approved today is on that line, but they're not improving those until they get the funds. But they're basically going in, taking out the tracks and putting them in, and putting new hot mix, new tracks in and everything. And I probably spoke with the guy for 30 minutes and tried to tell him that it was, in the middle of harvest, and that it wasn't a good location or a good time to be doing this. And they basically said that the railroad owned the right of way, or they owned their railroad right of way, and there wasn't much we could do about it as they're coming in. So they're going to probably be at each crossing like 2 or 3 days by the time they get it all taken out and put back. So we've talked to the villages out there, and we've also talked to the elevators that are along that route, so they're all aware of what's going on and that. So just kind of giving you guys a heads up in case you do receive calls on it.
And I mentioned you're going to make the school districts aware also.
Yes.
Because again, for instance, in Ellsworth, crossing there in town, that's it. You have to go a mile each direction to cross. So the school buses and the fire departments, all those people need to be aware that, you know, that that's gonna be the issue. In Aerosmith, I think there is a second temporary crossing, and in Holder, I believe that's the only one. So, and again, this isn't a good time, but I wish there's something we could do to put a jinx on the railroad and their busy time, but I don't know when that is, so.
Right. It sounded like they were supposed to be here at the beginning of September, and of course, so they're a month late, but
Okay. Well, I guess thank you for that information.
sure.
Member Thompson?
So it'll be just one at a time? They won't be doing them? Or do we know that?
I asked that question and they didn't give me a real good answer, because I think they just have a assembly line that goes down and one takes them, and so I don't think it's going to be. It's not going to be multiple county roads. It may be a county road and a township road.
That was my next question. They're going to do every crossing?
Yes.
Whether it's county or township?
Yep.
So instead of going 1 mile, you may be going 3 or 4
Right.
miles.
Yeah.
And in each of these communities, there's only one.
Yep.
There's only one passage.
I did talk him out of doing the one at Padjoy there on Lexington Leroy, because that's such a main thoroughfare, and that way, if you needed to get to Ellsworth or you need to get to Holder, you could use that road to. I mean, it's still going to be a 2 mile, a mile and a half to 2 mile, around, but.
Sorry. The trucks with weights, I mean, that's the township, I mean, we're already running on the roads anyway, right? Because it's
Right.
just that time of the year.
Exactly.
Okay.
All right. Anybody else?
Yes.
Member Bell?
Since the fiscal year is almost coming to an end, far as road work, how many projects for 2022 that have not been completed or started? You don't have to give me that number now, but I'm just saying that we're getting to the end of being able to do anything outdoors. And do you have any number in mind?
I believe if you look at our capital improvement program from last year, I think there's 2 projects that we are not going to get to. One is up at Pipeline Road around the west side of Lake Bloomington, and then the other one is in Chenoa that we just talked about earlier because of the water main work. But all the other projects that we had planned will be completed.
All right. Anything else? Next meeting then is Tuesday, December 1st, Tuesday, November 1st. If there's nothing else, we're adjourned. Thank you all for coming.